So thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome. This is the final talk of the series of Sarah Speaks Fashion and Mental Health, and the final talk is happening with Alison Lowe. This event is running in conjunction with my online virtual exhibition called Deaf Over Time Part 2. This virtual exhibition is showcasing my garments from the mental health collection, and each garment raises awareness of mental health conditions. There's also a wide variety of artwork between me and some collaborations, which again is just showing that any medium, any format can really open up the conversation on mental health. Both my exhibition and these sets of talks are kindly funded and supported by Time to Change. So hello everyone, my name is Sarah Hollebon. I'm a fashion designer based in Carnaby, London. My brand raises awareness of social issues that are happening in the world. The current areas I'm focusing on are mental health, trauma and sexual violence. I'm also a mental health campaigner in my spare time and a public speaker. So I volunteer a lot with Time to Change, and I also do public speaking on mental health, various areas of mental health through the Speakers Collective. They're an incredible collective of lots of different public speakers tackling a wide variety of subjects of social issues, ranging from mental health to physical disabilities. They're a really fantastic collective and they're all spread out around the UK. So like I said, I'm also volunteering for Time to Change as a Kingston champion. And like I also said, we are doing this event in collaboration with them. So Time to Change is a mental health campaign in England with the objective of reducing mental health related stigma and discrimination. I am part of the Time to Change Kingston hub, and we go out locally. Before the pandemic, we were going out physically within the local communities and really opening up the conversation, trying to, really tackle stigma and discrimination. And since the pandemic's hit, we've been doing a lot online. And equally, both have been really fantastic. So just want to start with a general health warning. We will be talking about serious and sensitive topics today, and as we don't know your mental health background or how you are feeling at the moment, we need you to know that we are going to be as open and honest as we can, and we don't know quite where the conversation is going to go. So that means that we need you to be very aware of your personal vulnerability, and we need you to pay attention to how you are feeling. And if at any point you start to feel anxious or distressed, by what you are hearing, please do log out or take a break for as long as you need. You can rejoin the event at any time should you feel ready. We also have a mental health first aider on hand in the audience. And also, if you do need support, you can call the Samaritans on 116 123. That's 116 123, or you can text SHOUT to 85258. That's 85258. We are also adding signposting mental health services for Mexico and Sri Lanka. This is because the previous talks we've had a reoccurring audience in these two countries. So best to just signpost as much as possible, really. There's lots of help out there and support. So please do look after yourselves and reach out if you need to. So again, just to keep the talk running smoothly for everyone, please do keep yourselves on mute. And yeah, we'll be doing a Q&A at the end. So if you do have any questions for me or Alison, just pop them in the chat. And hi to Mexico and Warwickshire. Right, so welcome, Alison. Hi, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. And thank you for inviting me to be here.
Oh, your absolute pleasure. I'm really excited to talk to you and learn about your experiences and hear, your suggestions. So so please do introduce yourself to everyone.
Thank you very much. So hello, everyone. Lovely to meet you all from Warwickshire to Mexico. That's going some on a Friday evening. So my name's Alison Lowe, as I said. I am a business consultant specialising in the fashion industry. I own 2 fashion agencies in London, Felicity's, which has been going since 2003, looking at supporting emerging fashion labels. So working with them on every aspect from design through to manufacturing to selling collections. And alongside that, run Start Your Own Fashion Label, which is an online platform with support and mentoring for startup fashion brands. And then, as I said, I'm a consultant. I work with lots of different brands, from the emerging to more established. And I also now have an amazing opportunity to go out and speak to lots of universities. I go internationally and speak at conferences and fashion weeks about the support that young designers need, and trying to see what we can do to help them grow successful businesses for the future. So that's me in a nutshell. I wear lots of different hats, but I think that sort of captures the main part of it.
Oh, hats are a great accessory. They really are. I love that. Thank you so much for that introduction. Incredible. Really, really happy to have you here today. So I first came across Alison via her book, How to Start Your Own Fashion Label. Now, this was recommended to me by a close friend and fellow fashion designer. I found her book extremely useful and easy to understand, especially the terminology, as I don't have a background in business. Having everything laid out clearly and straight to the point made me really gain the confidence to know that I can actually run my business. I now use that as my Bible for anything business related, and I couldn't recommend it enough to people. I then met Alison personally online through a Hump Day Hangout weekly session she kindly created in the first lockdown back in March last year. And yeah, so this session was for anyone in the fashion industry. This was an amazing weekly session, as not only did it help me keep up a routine, it also helped me stay motivated, inspired, and to really be part of a community with just lovely people. These are all vital things for us to have, I think, especially among the worries, the stress, and the anxiety from the pandemic and working from home. So Alison, first question. Do you think individuals working in the fashion industry are particularly high at risk of developing mental health issues? And if so, why?
I think, yes, they are. And over the last 20 years since I've established my business and been supporting fashion brands, I've definitely seen a rise in mental health issues around people working in the industry. And that's not just people who are starting their own businesses and running their own businesses, but within all different aspects, whether that's models, photographers, stylists. There is a lot of pressure on people trying to establish themselves in the industry. So when you say, why is it there? The pressure, I think historically, the fashion industry has always been about new. So having the new kids on the block, and really, people being there for a short time. But then the industry can also be very harsh and drop people just as quickly as well. So I've seen that quite a lot of time. The reason I actually set up Felicity's in the first place was actually through an identified need that young designers were not getting the support that they needed. And by not getting the support, they were feeling isolated, very stressed. The isolation was coming because of fear, because they didn't know who they could talk to, who they could trust. This feeling that you've suddenly got your own business, and it's like, well, I own a business, so therefore I'm supposed to know everything. And so then very scared to say, actually, I need help, or, is this something that happens naturally? And I often have people who'll come to me and say, I really hate to admit it, but, this is the problem I've got. And I'll say, I probably have 5 calls a day about that. You're not suffering alone. There's lots of people out there. But that just shows how, there is this fear of reaching out. So lack of support was a big one, I thought. High pressure. Sometimes that pressure coming from groups of creatives working together. And sometimes there can be that clashing personalities. And though you all do want to get that perfect job done at the end, whether that's a photo shoot or an event, sometimes those clashing personalities between, a photographer and a model and a designer can sort of raise like almost a pressure cooker effect. Other reasons, financial security. it's very hard to establish yourself in the fashion industry. Trying to get paid for anything is so difficult, and that leads to huge amounts of stress, which then obviously, you know, can lead on to mental health problems. Um, and that lack of security and that lack of financial pressure, and again that leading to, dare I admit, that I'm not actually, you know, successful in this, or how's everybody else in the industry actually making this a job when I don't seem to be able to do it. I recently spoke to a group of stylists, and they were like, I just don't understand it. You know, I've been in the industry for nearly 2 years and I haven't got a paid job yet. I've done lots of work, but no paid jobs. And I said, yeah, the editorial jobs, the lovely ones, great. You're never going to get paid for it. And I give an example of another stylist that I know who does very glamorous shoots in very beautiful international magazines. But how does he pay his bills? He also does the styling for things like the Sillet Bang advert, or whatever those wipe things are with that guy that runs across and scoops up with his little hand towel things. That's the paid jobs, not the glamorous ones. So again, this fear of failure, fear of not sure how to get to be successful, and not wanting to admit that you're struggling. So I have seen so many mental health issues, and particularly, as I said, working with young designers, the biggest, I suppose, fear for me is whenever I'm working with designers is the pressure that they're under, and just trying to get them to take a step back sometimes.
Yeah, wow. I can really understand that. And it is that element of just saying, you know, I need help, and to know that that's okay to say it, because a lot of times we don't want to say it because, you know, we think that we're meant to be here when really we're like down here, but that's okay. Like, I think with running a business, it isn't like, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a long period
Yeah.
of time, and it organically growing um is really important, I think.
And I think some of our media doesn't help that, because I often talk to young designers and they'll say, oh, well, I want to be like this brand, you know, and they were successful so quickly. And I said, no, they weren't. There was 8 years of hard work and pressure and failures before they got to that point where suddenly they arrive on the industry as the new generation and look at them and aren't they amazing? And you're like, they're not new. They may be tasked or called in the industry new generation. They're not. I remember many years ago, I worked with a designer who actually won the new generation title at Fashion Week. And she said she had to be the oldest new generation ever, because she was 41 years old and she'd been running her business for 10 years before she got acknowledged as a new generation. And I think we don't often explain that in the industry. So people think, oh, these other people are so successful and I don't get, why am I struggling here?
Yeah, wow, that's really interesting. I didn't know that. Wow, that's really interesting. I think a lot of, I think everything is very like glamorized and caked, and we don't actually see everything that goes on behind. And if we did see everything that goes on behind, then we'll know that we're not alone. And you know, and it's okay to, you know, ask for help. It's okay to struggle, because like you said, you know, running a business, there is a lot of failures. So getting past that first failure, it's not even a failure, is it? It's just a way to learn.
Yeah, it's all just learning. I mean, that's the thing, is when you know, when we look at being entrepreneurial, and I'm a great supporter of entrepreneurs. I was a founder of the Centre for Entrepreneurs. I'm a judge on the Great British Entrepreneur Awards. And being an entrepreneur means taking risks and failing and learning from it and moving on from it. But again, there's always been this, oh no, you've got to hit it right first time. You've got to go in as, you know, as soon as your business launches and be successful. And one of the other things, if anybody's ever been on one of my courses as well, that I talk about a lot, and when some people say to me, you know, oh, I want to be like this brand, or I want to be like that brand. And I go, really, do you? Do you want their debt? Do you know how much debt they are in to get to be this high profile? And sometimes that's millions of pounds worth of debt. And that again has always had a really big impact on different designers. And, you know, if we look at some of the losses we've had in the industry, debt has been behind a lot of those. And we are talking millions of pounds.
Wow. And yeah, being in debt will definitely stem mental health issues, definitely.
Yeah.
I remember one of our sessions we were speaking about back in March or April, and we were talking about how, you know, a lot of people in fashion have a second job, and that is what's paying their bills, like you just said, with that stylist. But a lot of people don't talk about having a second job because it's an element of maybe shame that they shouldn't be having the second job, but you know, if that's what's paying your bills to create this business that you really want to run, then that's okay. Like, I think that's totally fine, and it's just what you have to do. So it's like taking away that shame of having a second job, even if that second job isn't anything to do with fashion. If that's paying your bills, then you know, that's okay.
And actually, you should be commended for that, because you're not just doing one thing, you're doing two. You know, you're running your life, you've got another job, and you're starting a business. I was really pleased to actually hear Anna Winter recently say to a group of graduate students who were looking at starting their own fashion label. And she gave 5 points on it, and one of them was, for God's sake, find gainful employment. You know, you've got to find a job to be able to do those businesses, because what I see often is someone who has usually given up everything to start their own fashion label. And it's usually about the end of the first year that they are in crisis stage, and then come and they go, what should I do? And the times I've said, go get a job. Go get a job. You can't just keep funding this the way you're going. So you do need it. But again, very quiet, under the radar. Most people feel like they can't admit that they're doing that.
I do think if a lot of people begin like showing that, you know, these are the other ways that I'm helping to run my business, or just not even just talking about it casually as well, you know, in a general conversation about, yeah, my second job is a cleaner or something, then it just like takes away that like stigma and stuff like that. And then a lot of people won't feel like a failure for, you know, not getting to where they need to be right now.
I've also explained numerous times as well to fashion designers is, you know, particularly if they've come through some of the big fashion schools, I said, how many of your tutors own their own labels? I said, why do you think they're teaching at schools? Because it costs a lot of money to run your own label. And actually, if you do go in like LCF, CSM, Westminster, it is absolutely full of people with small fashion labels of every type. They're working as lecturers because they know the hardship that they've gone through, and they also need that gainful employment.
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, I went to London College of Fashion, and I would probably say like over 50% of my tutors were running their own label as well, or the other 50% used to, and now they just full on lecturers, sorry. So yeah, it really does show, and there's no, and like you said, like people should be applauded for that, because you are running two things at once. You know, it shows that sheer stamina and strength that it takes. So it needs to be completely twisted around and just applauded for it.
Yeah. And that's some of the work that I really want to do. And that's why I go out and I do lots of lectures and talks, and why I do things around entrepreneurship, is to actually just say, you know, just forget the headline bits of the glossy bits you see, but really look at what's going on underneath and ask people, you know, just see what's going on out there. Or the other great thing that I know when I first started my businesses, and have always done, is read biographies of other people who've run businesses, and you find out all the other jobs and things that they did side by side as they were trying to build their businesses. And I always think about, you know, people like Ralph Lauren. Ralph Lauren is a brilliant example. He didn't set up this huge multiple organization within a couple of years. He started off selling ties, knocking on doors, like, you know, the old dust and cleaner people, and tried to sell ties through that. He then started a fashion label and he went bankrupt. So then he started again, and that's how he built his empire, because he learned all those different things. His knocking on doors, selling ties, put him in front of customers. But people only see Ralph Lauren as the brand it is today, with all these multiple different chains of it. No business started like that. Every business
Yeah.
starts small.
Yeah, I think reading biographies is amazing. I listen to a lot of podcasts of big business people, and they really talk about how they started, and it just puts my mind at ease. It also motivates me to keep going, so it's fantastic to do that. I do think media plays a big part in this perceived perception of what the brand looks like, but like you said, it's really about understanding what's going on behind there, and then also figuring out how you can implement that with your brand as well. Yeah, I just think that's so important. Thank you so much.
That's okay.
It is commonly reported that some fashion companies hold toxic and unhealthy working environments. How can we make sure fashion companies cultivate a healthy and positive environment to work in?
I this is an interesting question, because I'm actually not that sure. I don't know that we can change some of those companies that have these very toxic that are. Part of my hope is the next generation come through with a much better education, a much better understanding, and just look at the industry differently. I think, unfortunately, some of those very toxic organisations, you look at the people who's at the top of them, and while they're there, they're never going to let anything change. They like they're power hungry, they like the way they run their businesses. And some of those, I know I've worked in some of them, I've done consultancy in some of them, and they're not going to change. It is very difficult to get them to change unless something really big happens. So it is very, very difficult. I remember working quite a few years ago with a high street, young fashion, female fashion high street brand. And, they were struggling. They were having lots of human resources complaints. And you looked at the organisation, and there were 5 men over 50 running the organisation, and no woman in senior management at all. And again, they were just creating this barrier that was stopping anything changing underneath it. So sometimes you do just have to wait. You just have to wait until a new generation and somebody manages to break through and get into that level. Also, I think, you have to say we have more of a call out culture these days. People do call out companies, and they do call out workforces of, that are toxic. And, maybe that is a good thing, that it does start opening the conversation. But there is so much that is hidden. And, I unfortunately do see some awful things at different levels of brands, with control and these power hungry people who are behind it. So it's a difficult one. It's education, it's change, it's, as I said, bringing in new generation who have different thoughts. But it's some of these fashion companies, they are so big. They have, a whole range of management levels and investor levels. So trying to turn them is like turning a huge ship, and it just takes ages to be able to do that. So yeah, it's difficult. It is really difficult. So education, people coming through with different ideas, but they've got to be able to open up and let those ideas filter through. And I do find, I'm still shocked. I recently was taking part in a big conference around retail, and they were talking about, equality in retail and, gender pay gap. And I'm saying, I can't believe in 2021 we are still talking about gender pay gaps. We would have thought we'd got way past those issues. But some of these big organisations, they're still doing horrific things. One of them had worked out their way around the gender pay gap. They weren't employing any men. They'd actually turned it around, like, if there's no men, there's no comparison. We've dealt with it. And I'm like, no, that's not dealing with it. There's different ways. So, they do have unhealthy working practices, and it is very hard. All we can have is, people out there campaigning, trying to get in there, trying to talk to them. And, you know, being somebody who does that on a consultancy, well, sometimes I succeed. That particular high street brand that I said had no women now actually is equal across it. They have women and men. It's taken 9.5 years, but we got there in the end. 9.5 years of hard work campaigning. Others, unfortunately, have never succeeded.
Well, but that's great to have that example of, I know it's 9 years, that's a long time, but that is great to like see that. It just shows that big companies, it does take a long time, like you were saying, you know, there's so many people involved. So, you know, 9 years of a big company, turning that around and having that equal balance is great to see that it's possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do kind of agree that I can see that it could be really hard to really make change, and especially if people are putting up these barriers, that is really hard.
Because if it's education, and you know, if you could do education, if you could do conferences and things with them, then you hopefully would be able to change mindsets about it. The problem is they often put the barrier up of, but there's no funding to do that. We don't have any money to do the training of it. And that they're able to put in barriers everywhere we go to try and find ways through it. So actually, one of the organisations that's doing a lot around that is Retail Week. So Retail Week have this amazing conference every year called Be Inspired. And they, again, are trying to work to, you know, change all these different elements and change the agenda and cultivate healthier working practices. And what they're doing through Be Inspired is they are offering free mentoring, they're offering free training within these organizations just to try and do it. And again, I became an ambassador of Be Inspired just to try and, again, you know, act in that ambassadorial role to try and make that change. So I thought that was really great of Essentia, that they've actually recognized that to actually make change, you have to speculate and you have to, you know, invest in it in some ways, and they've decided to give out that free mentoring and training.
That's fantastic. That's really great. I'm definitely going to look into them because that sounds amazing. Yeah, and if companies are able to do some form of free training, I mean, there are a lot of resources out there online that people can, you know, grab for free. A lot of them you have to pay, of course, but some you can get resources online for free. So maybe it's that element of just trying to figure out if someone in the company can be slightly flexible and just be like, well, you know, maybe look down this avenue. But it's great to hear about Retail Week. I will definitely be looking them up, and I'm sure everyone is very grateful to hear about them too. Do you think people in the fashion industry are open to talking about mental health?
I think it's definitely getting better. I think when I started my agencies, you know, 2003, no, there was no talk about it. It was just, if you can't put up with the stress, get out of the industry, was basically the response you used to get. I remember working fashion weeks in those first few seasons, and the pressure backstage of these fashion weeks were horrific. The working conditions there were really bad. That was in the days when we still had very young models. We didn't have healthy eating practices backstage. Some of the designers were horrendous, the way they used to talk to people and scream at them. And I remember just thinking, I don't know why anybody wants to work in this industry. And you'd have this like 4 hours of everybody screaming at each other and shouting at each other. And then the show would happen, and then there'd be this wild party because everybody had to sort of release this tension that they'd done. And it was just such an unhealthy working practice because people were going through these highs and lows and highs and lows. And it just wasn't acknowledged that that was part of the issue. And then people started talking obviously about healthy models and those areas behind it. But sometimes that wasn't looking at, well, what was causing those issues behind it in the first place. As I said, over the years, thankfully, it has got a lot better. And, you know, go backstage and I have seen designers who, you know, they do offer meditation rooms for, you know, any of the hair, makeup and model teams to go backstage. You know, there's lovely healthy foods backstage now, special rooms, some of them that can go and break out into. So we're definitely seeing a move around that, and the recognition that that isn't. But no, it wasn't. And you know, I think it was even around the time of Lee McQueen. And I think, you know, Lee was under huge pressure. He was a typical creative who just held everything inside him. And as he lost his support network of his mum and Izzy Blow, he just felt abandoned, I suppose, and really stuck. But even with that happening, there was very little talk about their mental health issues that led to that. So I am glad to see it is happening. Again, it's younger generation. You know, because I work with lots of young designers, I see some young designers doing amazing things. But, you know, I remember working with one particular young designer, and mental health issues are big for her. She's had various mental health issues herself, and she doesn't do well under stress and pressure. And I recognized that in her very quickly when we started helping her business, and, you know, just took her out one day, and we were supposedly under the guise of we were going to look at retailers, and it wasn't. It was just a chance for me to get her away, to actually get her to talk to me, rather than this sitting in an office talking across a desk. And, you know, we talked about it that day, and she said she was very scared that if she said anything, it would, you know, create negative press for her. People wouldn't want to work with her. Buyers might not want to buy her collection because they think, you know, if she had some sort of crisis, she might not be able to deliver the collection. And she was sitting on all these things. And I remember going like, they don't have to know any of that. You know, this is up to you. And over a few years, she became braver about talking about it. She partnered with some different agencies in doing her shows, very subtle at the beginning, you know, not really screaming it from the light bulbs. But then I was absolutely amazed one day when she rang up and she said, I'm doing a podcast about mental health. I'm going to run a whole podcast series. You know, do you think I'm crazy? And I said, no, I don't think you're crazy at all. I think this is the wonderful thing to be able to do. And it's gone on great. And I actually think she gets a lot more support now because she has more openly talked about it. And she's talked about the times when she has had to say, I do just have to step away from my business today. I'm going to take a break. And I think that was the hardest, when she once had to take 6 months out, and that meant she missed a season, when she was in that whole seasonal showing at fashion weeks, taking part in a trade show. And she thought that would be it, that her label would be over. And she said she didn't know afterwards whether it was a good thing or a bad thing, but actually nobody missed her. And they didn't realise in some ways that, you know, she had personally stepped back, and the business had still been running, but she hadn't been the face of it, and it was fine. So I do think now we do have much more people who are open and they're talking about it. And I think if we have, you know, amazing role models out there, then it becomes more acceptable. And I think that opens the conversation a lot more.
Definitely. Wow, that designer that you spoke about sounds amazing. It's quite refreshing to hear that she managed to take a step back. I know that's very, very hard to do. So the fact that she even managed to do it is just like phenomenal. But that also, I completely understand why she might think that, you know, everything might fall if she's not there, especially if she can't maybe partake in a season. So it's great to see that everything still managed to carry on in her business, because I think that's really important for people in their fashion brand to know that if things do get too much, that they can take a step back, and you aren't gonna like fall from the sky. Like, you are able to come back, and in a way maybe it's good that maybe they didn't notice that she'd gone, because then she could just come back, you know.
Yeah, because that's the other fear, is that you come back and then suddenly it becomes a big deal when you come back. So that was what she didn't want either, of having to then face, well, why did you disappear, to why did you come back? But one of the things I didn't actually explain in that, and that's the important part as well, is one of the things that I say to all designers is, you run your business your way. everybody doesn't have to run the same business model. So when we were working with her, and when we did acknowledge that there could be problems, you know, around her way of working, that she might need to take this time off, we actually created the structure for her to be able to do that. And that's an important thing, is again, it's not just thinking everybody has to run a business a certain way. So throughout it, because I'd always said to her, she has a tendency to overwork and then get to burnout stage. So with her as well, it was trying to get her to structure her business so she took regular breaks away anyway, to try and not get to that crisis stage. So trying to get her not to overwork. And whether that was just, again, some days just ringing her up and going, you're not going into the office today or the studio today, you know, today, take a day. Because the other thing is you can't be creative if you are in that issue where you're so under pressure, you actually stop being effective and you can't be creative. So again, with her, it was really looking at create the business structure, run your business in a way that can help you do that. We do the same with people with all sorts of disabilities, of thinking, again, you know, just because you're running your business doesn't mean you have to run it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You know, again, think about what is the best way to run your business. So if you need the time off, you can have that, or you can go and have the break. Or you might need to go into hospital for something and you have to have that break. So I'm always very keen in working with anybody we work with, that if you can be open and say that these are my things that may hamper me from growing my business, then you're better off, because then you can deal with the ways that you're going to get around that. I think the problem comes is if you don't admit you're going to have a problem, until then the problem arrives.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really, really important, and it's great to know that, like, you know, your business model can be, it's not like one or two different types of business models in the fashion industry. You know, you can really like tailor it to your needs, you know, your values, everything like that. I also wonder what your thoughts are on the slow fashion movement. Do you think bringing that in will actually help mental health? Because, you know, with slow fashion, you're not churning out these crazy amount of collections every year. You know, you're really taking time to create capsule collections and stuff like that. And not only is it more sustainable, but also it's sustainable for your own mind as well.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I've always said, right the way back in 2003, when people didn't even dare talk about seasonless collections, I've never understood seasons for very small startup brands, because there's just too much pressure on it. And it's not sustainable, as in you're creating a collection, you have this tiny window to try and sell it in. As a small business, you don't know enough people to sell it in that tiny window. So then you're almost going, throw away that collection, let's create a new one. And that is not an effective business model for anybody starting a business. So right the way back from the beginning, I have always been an advocate of, if you can go without doing seasonal collections, you will build a much more effective business. To me, as an entrepreneur coming in from outside of the industry, I never got it. To me, it was always like this crazy schedule that never made sense. And this throwaway culture of, you know, create a collection, work it, will really work on it. And I think, you know, seeing the designers putting, you know, their love and passion into it, and then having to a few months later go, oh, well, you know, that's over, move on, next season. That, again, pressure, heartbreaking for them when they've put all that love and attention to it, and it's like, it's over. And, you know, I didn't get really anything from it before I'm on to the next one. So to me, just slowing down the whole industry. I think the thing about going seasonless as well, it moves it away from the pressure of fashion weeks. I don't think, again, fashion weeks are great for young designers. They're great for the big brands. They're part of their advertising. You know, they are set up, they have the huge teams that can manage that. But for smaller brands, trying to work in those pressure cooker scenarios to this tight schedule just is, you know, ridiculous situation. So for many years as well, I've been advising designers not to do fashion weeks until they're really ready, until they can advertise. You know, don't put yourself under that pressure. And I know sometimes it is your dream to have done the fashion show, you know, and to get your name in the lights sort of thing. But it is a vanity project, and it's often not worth the pressure to get the reward that you might just get from it. So again, slowing everything down, being able to run it at a reasonable amount without having that burnout, to me, is much better.
And sorry, going back to the first thing that you said about the seasons, I remember you talking a lot about that in your book, and I found that very, very interesting. And it really like just made me feel a lot more calmer, I guess, because that's not what my business is about anyway, and that's not what I want to do. So it's really nice to like know that that's okay, and know that a lot of other people are feeling the same, and stuff like that. And then also with Fashion Week, it's also great to know that you know, Fashion Week isn't the be all end all. You know, fashion still happens all throughout the year. People are still wanting to buy clothes all throughout the year. Like, it's just not like 2 weeks a year. So I think that's really, really great and positive to hear that. And
also the consumers don't understand, because that's the bit I never understood, is it's only the industry that drives those seasonal collections and fashion weeks. It's an industry thing. If you go to the consumer hasn't got a clue. They don't understand, particularly now when it's gone digital and they're seeing fashion weeks and they're going, but the stuff's not in the shop and I don't get it for 6 months. I don't understand it. Like, why are you showing me something? Why have I got all these Instagram pictures? Why is every newspaper full of these pictures of a product I can't buy? So I think part of that as well is some of that, though, and I have to say, even though I work in lots of the fashion institutions, it is still coming out of education. I'm really shocked how many designers are still coming out having completed that. The only focus is on doing catwalk at the end of their degree. You know, it's about, you've got to do catwalk, you've got to do these seasonal collections. Again, if we're looking at the education, that has to come from the universities, that they stop teaching students that this is the be all and end all if you start your own fashion label, because that's where half of this is coming from, is they've been taught to design around seasons and fashion weeks, and we need that education system changing.
That's so true, actually, because I learned a lot about that when I was at uni too, and at college as well, really. And I know that you are a guest lecturer in a lot of universities, so that's great to like have you go in and talk and hopefully change that, because that's it creates this damaging like perception of what you're supposed to be doing when you leave. And a lot of the time you don't actually carry on getting support when you leave, so you're on your own thinking you're meant to be doing this, and then it's not working, and then you get all this financial pressure. It's just like, it can really easily snowball into all this negativity, and then you can't be creative, like you're saying.
So I think there's a lot in there. So I think that idea of failure is often coming from the education system, of that to be a successful designer, you create a fashion collection like this, and then you wholesale it. You're going to sell it to Liberties and Harrods and Selfridges and all those things, which haven't been buying any new designers for about 8 years. And then you're going to do catwalk shows, and you're going to be a big star. And no, you're not. And also, maybe get some experience before you start your own fashion label as well. So I'm not going to name a name, but there is one particular fashion school that I don't work in, and that is because they asked me to change my masterclass to recommend that all students did start their own fashion label straight out of school. And I said, oh, no, they need to go and get experience first. They need to learn at other people's expenses, or they need to get a job alongside it and then build it slowly. And it was one of their tick box for their funding, was that they have so many designers who start their own fashion label. So I said, no, I refuse to change my talk, and I don't lecture there anymore because of it. But again, what pressure that they are putting under their students to say, go on, start your own fashion label, or you'll be brilliant, do a seasonal collection. Awful, still really awful.
That is really awful to hear that. And then a lot of the times you don't even get business modules for your university degree. So how are you even supposed to learn about the business side of things?
Yeah.
So
education. So some of that to me is about going back and education. And the other thing is, you'd asked me about the talking about mental health as well. So again, I think if it was done in the education environment, if it's done where you're talking to the people who are likely to be starting out businesses in the future if we talked about mental health at that point as well. So think about, are you the right person to do this sort of business? How do you cope under stress and pressure? Do you have enough of a support network to make sure that you do have, those people that can really help you? In all my talks, I always talk about getting mentors and supporters in your business. So again, in the education element, I think they should be talking about this at university stages or college stages, not waiting until basically they've got to burnout stage.
Yeah, I completely agree. Learning about how your mindset works, and really making sure, like, how do you cope under pressure normally, like even at university, and what kind of support do you have around you is so important. I mean, since I started my business, I was very fortunate to straight away get mentoring through a competition I won, and that was incredible. And I also have developed more mentors. So mentoring is so important. And then the person who's mentoring also gets stuff out of it too, to know that they can help that person. It's so important to have that support network around you. Vital, I think.
Yeah, it is vital. Nobody can, build a business on your own. You have to have other people around you. You can't build a career on your own, whether you're starting your own fashion label or not. But even if, you're going to work somewhere else, you're going to build in the career. To me, mentoring or coaching, whatever we decide to call it these days, is vital, whichever way you go. And again, in the States, coaching and mentoring is huge. You start getting mentors and coaches from what we would class as middle school here, and you get coaches and mentors all the way through. I'd love to see some of that being implemented in this country, because again, it's acceptable. If you know when you're 10 to 12 years old, say, that it's okay to go and talk to somebody, you have this person that isn't your parents and isn't your teacher that you can talk to about anything, then as that person grows up, they're used to that. Unfortunately, we don't have any of that in the education system much, or I don't know, I'm not aware of it here. But again, I think it should be built at that school level so that you get used to finding those other people then around you, and you always have mentors. I was always very lucky because I had one. I sort of didn't realise that was what she was until many years later, because I didn't even know the word mentoring and coaching. But it happened by fluke. I was in a hotel with my parents on vacation, and I was being a stroppy teenager, and my parents had basically abandoned me and had gone off and left me because I refused to go for the day. So I was sitting in this hotel lobby, and this lady started talking to me and asking me, what was wrong, because I obviously looked like, miserable 13-year-old with a soppy face. And she got talking to me, and an amazing lady called Mary. And we stayed in touch over the years, and she was always my mentor. She used to ring me up from the States, how are you doing? What are you doing? I remember when I was getting to the point of what I wanted to do for a career, and everybody kept telling me that I would go into my father's business, I would be a lawyer, I'd go to Oxford or Cambridge to study, and I'm like, I want to be an actress. And my school laughed at me when they went, that's lovely, darling, you can do amateur dramatics later. But it was Mary. Mary was the one that was always nice. I said, Mary, they won't let me do it. And Mary's like, no, you go back. This is what, say this to them, or, why do you really want to do it? So I naturally fell into it, but I've always valued that is such an important progress through. And so I think, again, if we can start educating early and educating through schools and into universities about the pressure, then when people have set up their businesses, they know how to respond.
I completely agree. Yeah, tackling it early on realizes that you are able to go and talk about your problems to someone, just in general, that's okay. And then it just develops so beautifully. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that and your story about Mary. Do you still keep in contact with her?
Unfortunately, she is no longer with us, but I did stay in touch with her right up until the end, and actually still stay in touch with her sons.
Oh, that's so lovely. That's a really beautiful story. Beautiful. I am aware of time, so we could go on to the Q&As if you're happy with that.
Yes, of course.
Or, I mean, I do have like one more question. I don't know if you want to answer that.
I'm happy. I'll go with whatever you want to ask or
Okay.
go with.
Well, I think the final question would be really, really interesting to hear for everyone. So if people are able to stay, and for the Q&A, that would be great. We'll be very grateful to have you guys all stay. So the final question is, how do you cope with pressure?
For me, it's walking. Always walked. Time away. Move away from whatever it is and go for a walk. You know, I'm somebody who walks a lot anyway. You know, I've always had a dog, so I walk morning, I walk evening. But even if I'm in like the office for the day, or if I was backstage of a fashion week and it is literally all going, you know, all different people are shouting and screaming, I just go 5 minutes and I will literally walk around the block and come back. Because I just find that's my way. Many years ago, I used to smoke. So my excuse was always I would go outside to have a cigarette, and that it was just the distancing thing. And then after many years, I realized that I didn't actually need the cigarette. I could just go outside. It's okay to just go outside. And then I just found, well, just go outside and walk around the block and come back in. But it's really odd because if you say you're going outside, but you're not having a cigarette, people go, why? And you're like, because I just need out of here for 5 minutes. But yes, just walking for me. And I think, again, it is just that space issue of moving away. And I've even found, you know, during lockdown, again, because I'm tending to be very static in front of a computer all day, and I was starting to get really feeling, you know, quite down. I was finding it very challenging. I was finding every day exhausting. And I realized it was because I am used to moving around a lot more. And I would, you know, walk between meetings. So when everybody else gets on the tube and everything, I am that mad person who walks for miles across London. And I'll go like, yeah, or, you know, just time out and just walk because I process things. So during the lockdown, I actually found like just stop. So actually during the day as well, mid-morning, mid-afternoon, I just go and walk around the block here. Again, I think my neighbours may think I'm a little odd because my dog doesn't want to walk during the day. He only likes going walk morning and evening, so he doesn't want to do the midday walk. So I just have to go on my own. But it's space, and I think sometimes it's finding that way of just moving yourself away. So I walk, take breaks, talk to people, and all sorts of different people, not necessarily having to talk to a mentor or having to talk to somebody saying, I'm feeling down or depressed today, but actually maybe talking to somebody who just inspires me, who's just funny. So, you know, I maybe have a whole group of different people and different ones that I will call on different days. You know, one that will cheer me up, one that I could perhaps talk to, somebody else that maybe like I can talk to a business issue about. But yeah, time away from the desk, talk to someone and have a walk.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that is a weird thing about the smoking. I mean, I used to smoke as well, so I do understand that. It's like you can just go outside, like you don't have to go outside and put a cigarette. Like, but it's weird when people are like, "Well, why are you going outside?" It's okay to go outside for a little bit. And I think even just 5 minutes walking around the block, wherever you are, anyone can do that. That's accessible to anyone. And even maybe if you're in a wheelchair, you know, you can go in the wheelchair around the block as well, you know, just getting outside in that fresh air. And it's about changing that environment and that space, like you said, that you're in. It just can bring clarity to everything that you're feeling, and you know, it can really bring mindfulness as well. So yeah, I think that's great. Just around the block isn't that long either.
Yeah.
You
One
know?
of the other things I really advise all business owners as well to do, and it's something that I do on a regular basis as well, is take a day away and go somewhere different and just not think about work for that day. But actually for creatives, that's when you get those creative mindset days. So I try to, any of the brands that I work with on a regular basis, I try to say once a month, I want you to go and take a day and do something completely different. You know, go and try a different activity, go, you know, swimming, go for a long walk in the woods or something, but go and do something different that has nothing to do with your business for a day. And that really helps sort of clear the mind and helps you think about creatively. And they often say they'll come back then and they're really inspired to do something else. But usually you have to have something else to focus on. So just to say, oh, I'm just going to have a day off, sit in front of TV or something, it's not going to work. Go and do something, go and, you know, a random activity. And that's sometimes the thing that really helps as well.
I love that. I love that a lot. That really helps me as well. And like you said, you come back and you feel so much more inspired, and that's what you need to be running your business. So that is a wonderful tip. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I think we'll go on to the Q&A now. So the first one, which one's the first one, Persephone? Is it a question one? Okay. So this is from Davina for Alison. How do you think changes can be made in the fashion industry to make it more accessible for new designers and entrepreneurs?
How can I make things more accessible? Sorry, say that. I missed what it.
How do you think changes can be made in the fashion industry to make it more accessible for new designers?
Sorry. Yeah, so I think education. I think, again, education in the system so that we have these opportunities. I think more support networks for smaller designers. I think one of the things, particularly the fashion industry in the UK, there is some really great support out there, but for very few designers through things like the, you know, British Fashion Council. But there's an awful lot of other people out there that are totally unsupported and don't know where to go. So I think if funding could be made more available, if funding could be shared across other people instead of it all going to one pot for the same people over and over again, something that I've campaigned for many years, then I think that change would mean that actually having support networks, having more education and training would help us have more designers and more entrepreneurs out there. So I think we need more support. We don't have many industry groups where people can go along and get support and help from as well. So I think we just need some more funding to help around business sides of fashion designers, and it not just all going to, you know, doing London Fashion Week, as great as that is. It's not everything. There should be a lot more funding. Arts Council get a lot more than fashion ever does.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Arts Council does seem to get a lot. But then also we spoke about funding once in our sessions, and sometimes designers might be able to apply for funding through the Arts Council, depending on what kind of projects you're doing. So it is also like maybe looking down other avenues, you know, it might not always be down like the fashion funding avenues, you know, there might just be like startup businesses, you know, there's no reason why you can't apply for stuff like that too.
So yeah, seeing more incubator units and things as well coming along, that, you know, where places where designers can go would be really beneficial.
That's great. What you do, it must be stressful, and in order to help others, you need to look after yourself. How do you manage your own mental health?
So as I said, walking, talking. I have a habit to overwork. And, you know, so I know within my own mental health issues is I just go, yes, 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 because I'm really passionate about supporting people and I want to do loads of things. And then I realise that I'm getting to the burnout stage. And one of the ways to counter that was actually moving outside of London. Because I now have this commuting time, and actually that made me have 2 hours a day when I can't really do much anyway. And being very clear of using that commuting time for myself, whether that's listening to podcasts, listening to great music, and doing that. So, you know, when I'm back in working in the offices or working back in town, commuting is actually my time to really think as well.
That's really nice. I know a lot of people use their commute as well for their own time to do whatever they want to do. So that's great. So the question 3 from Oscar: could we ask your thoughts on approaching small scale production runs, assuring quality with no production manager? So I guess, you know, just you doing it all yourself, like the designer.
For me, it's all about building the relationships with the right people. So when you're looking for those small factories, those small production run units, it's all about relationship. If you're doing it yourself, you need to build the trust. You need to find people who will work with you. And there's plenty of people out there and plenty of small production units who do really specialize in working with those young brands or young designers who perhaps don't know quite how to work with a production unit, and they give a lot of support. So it's really about trying to find the right people to work with to be able to do that. So all about trust, about partnerships. Again, see if you can find other people to support and network, to help you find those right people that you can trust. I hope that answered that.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Question 4, around the fact that setting up and running a business puts more pressure on someone's mental health. Do you think it's harder for ethnic minorities and BAM communities? Also, what support is available for them?
It's getting better. There is more support for different ethnicities and BAM groups actually setting up businesses. I mean, it's not great. It's not great for anyone. And I don't know, I can't say whether it is harder or not, because I've obviously never been in that position myself of knowing whether it's harder. I see people having challenges of starting up their businesses from all sorts of different angles because of who they are as individuals. So it is difficult for me to say. I would probably say, yes, it is challenging. Probably it probably should be a lot better. And I'm really pleased to see that there is more support around it. There has always been, around the fashion industry and around the big organisations behind it, this very cliquey, you've got to be part of this particular group to be able to get in there. So I always felt that for a lot of people, they felt that they are the outsider and it's very hard to get into the industry. So again, these different support mechanisms, these better incubator units to help and support would really make a difference. And particularly for people really understanding then the challenges that people coming from different ethnic groups would have when they're setting up their businesses.
That's fantastic. Question 5, to attend top schools for an MA, so CSM, Royal College, these cost something like 17 grand, which is more than the government MA loans even covers. Yeah, that's so true. Not including rent money to fund living in London for 18 months, 2 years. I know Lee McQueen managed to graduate CSM while on dole, but if his family weren't London based in the first place, I have my doubts whether he would have ever attended CSM. To what extent do you think fashion is behind an elitist paywall?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have no idea how people do it. I mean, it is such a phenomenal amount of money to put into it. It's hard enough doing your, undergraduate degrees, but going to postgraduate level and funding it. I sometimes have to say, do you really need it? What are you doing it for? What extra returns are you going to get from it? So if you have the capacity to do that, that's great. But again, it doesn't have to all be about education. And I have seen some amazing talent who's come up over the last few years who've actually done no fashion degrees and no support. So my thought is why do people do it? And, does it really give you that much credibility to help you do a successful business? I think we are moving away from those days when you had to be an LCF or CSM or Parsons graduate to be able to have a successful business. I think we're moving away from that, which means that, maybe you don't have to go that way, because to cover £17,000 plus all your extra on costs, it's hard. If it was me, I don't know that I'd be doing it.
Yeah, it's very hard. It is taking away that element of like, you don't have to be going to these top universities. Talent is anywhere and everywhere. It really is.
And as I said, and if we can move away from, again, those cliquey industry groups that say you have to go to LCF and CSM to be able to be successful in the industry, then that will be better. I was rabbit because actually I have no qualifications in fashion. I have business degrees, I have accountancy qualifications, but I don't have anything in fashion. And I remember once talking at a really big conference, and saying I didn't have any qualification in fashion. And there was an audible gasp in the room that was like, how dare this person who is an authority be talking to us when actually they're obviously no authority because they didn't go to one of these schools. And I just turned around and said, okay, I didn't have a degree, but I do have an MBE from the Queen for services to the fashion industry. And I think that tops your courses any day. It was just, but I couldn't believe that there was a gasp because I hadn't studied. And it was like, I can learn a lot about the fashion industry without having to go to fashion school.
Totally. Yeah, I can't believe there was a gasp as well. Gosh, that must have been so bizarre.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's great comeback. It's fantastic. I think that a lot of fashion colleges expect their graduates to start a collection. Young people have zero idea of how to run a company and all of the various roles within that. I think this is down to institutionalized college lecturers who don't work within the industry once they enter the college system. There are so many paid jobs within the industry that graduates aren't aware of. We've got to start this conversation before graduates leave college.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And, unfortunately, I do see them in the universities as well. And, I've heard them teaching some very outdated practices of all sorts of levels, not just in design, but things like marketing and just going, that's not even relevant today. But I'm also really lucky that there are some universities. So LCF has been really amazing. I'm currently working with University of East London, and they've been amazing. And they've asked me to come in and listen, and where are things current and what is appropriate for students to be learning about the industry. And they're looking at setting up this whole new enterprise unit. So I think some universities are really trying to do things better and bring in, because yes, some of these tutors, they are institutionalized. They haven't been in the industry for 25 years. It's a very different industry today to it was 25 years ago. So, they may have some theoretical elements that are useful, but it's got to be balanced with current industry knowledge and skills.
Yeah, I'm sure your role is going to be invaluable to them to really explain what's current and what's just too far down, that's just not relevant anymore. So Davina says, I totally agree with Alison. We are starting to see the next generation coming through with focuses on mental well-being.
Yeah.
Really, really, really true. It is all about the next generation bringing in all these new values, new ideas. It's just going to be fantastic. So from Steve, in her last book, Ruby Wax mentions the clothing company Patagonia, they're amazing, and how the inclusive, collaborative and supportive culture within it has made it so successful. And this should be a model for other fashion organizations.
Yeah, I'm totally agree with that. I think companies with purpose now, I think we are moving into a new era of entrepreneurship, of the sorts of businesses. And it's no longer just about creating product. It's much more than that. It's the brand ethos, the brand ethics. It's about the purpose of the company, that, why are we doing it? Why have we even set up a business? What is it that we want to achieve by it? What impact can we create? Instead of thinking, let's set up another business that's just pushing product out there to people who don't really need, there's enough product out there. So companies with purpose. If anybody hasn't, there's a brilliant guy called Simon Sinek. And Simon Sinek, Sinek, he does lots of talks and TED Talks about companies with purpose. And he says, we shouldn't be just looking at the what we do and how we do it, but the why we do it. And that is a business of the future. So companies like Patagonia, all of these new, B Corporation companies as well, anybody that's got B Corp status that have really gone through their ethics are really the future as far as I'm concerned with businesses.
That's fun. That's really interesting to know that. And Simon, I've just saved his name, so I'm definitely going to look that up. Toby was saying that anyone interested in reading the books about certain designers who got started in the industry, you can pick them up in TK Maxx and Home Sense. That's great to know. You know, you can get books secondhand, of course. It's great to know that. So another comment, I was on Sarah's course at uni. It was until 2 years after working in a bar that a customer who was a lecturer from Ravensbourne said to not bother with masters. So glad I haven't. Alison has mentored me and been one of the biggest supports. I'm still working on it, but she has given me valuable information, and I am a lot closer than I would have been if I hadn't taken a short course with her. Simon's the one that recommended the book to me as well. This is Simon Greenaway.
Simon. Yeah, and always happy to support and help. Yeah, I mean, I do think you sometimes just, instead of this natural progression into moving into MAs, is just why are you doing it? What will you achieve from it? You know, do you also want to add on that debt, particularly if you're going to look at starting your own business in the end, which is going to take more money than you can possibly imagine. The fact that you're going to be going into it with all that extra debt maybe as well, it's a very tough call. So yeah, definitely think about it very hard before you naturally move into the MA level.
Yeah, because I was looking at MA in my final year of uni, and I found out that a lot of people who apply for MAs are people who you know, have gone back into the industry for a long time, and then they decide that they want to do an MA. Like a lot of the times they're not actually straight from BA, which I think is really interesting.
Or people do it because they don't know still what they want to do. So rather than come out and have to find a career, or, you know, and they don't know what that career they want to do, they go into the MA because they're like, oh, well, I just stay in education because I don't know what it is that I want to do yet. And you know, I remember that with, you know, my sister when, you know, we both had very different career paths, and she did her degree, she then did her master's, she then went on to her PhD. And I do remember going like, why? And she said, well, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up yet, so I'm just going to stay in education. And actually then she stayed in the university and got a job. So she actually never came out in the workforce. But again, it's very, if you don't know, I don't think sometimes, again, there's that support mechanism for you to say, you know, I still think we have a long way to go with career service in this country, and particularly around the creative industries. So, you know, it's just well, I'll keep doing the MA because then it might come to me of what I'm ready to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely like figuring out what you want to do, and getting that industry experience can really show you if you want to be in that industry or not. And if you don't want to be in that industry anymore, that's okay too. Life is a journey. It's all about figuring out what works for you at the present time.
Definitely. Yeah, portfolio careers is what we have these days.
Yes.
So you don't have to stay one career for life. You don't have to make it perfect as you first come out. For many years, I was always worried that I actually have always run my own businesses because I always thought I was unemployable, because I've had so many different careers that it was like, no, who's going to employ me? Because you just think, well, why has she done this? And then she's gone and done that. But actually, I realized that all of those careers built me to where I am today. And it is what we now call, it has an excuse now, it is a portfolio career.
I love that name. I love that. That's fantastic. And no matter what, you know, career you're going down, you're learning experiences from that, and that can be applied to whatever you then end up doing in the future. I'm sure every experience that you've had has helped you to, you know, where you are now, like you're saying. So that's fantastic.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I couldn't, I actually do get very annoyed with people who teach things around, you know, entrepreneurship or running businesses who've never actually done them. And because I say, how can you teach somebody about business because you don't understand that? You know, I know what it is. I have had the phone call with my first ever business. And I remember getting a phone call from my accountant, and he's saying, you've got a month, Alison. You either pull this business round, or this time next month, you'll be bankrupt. And nothing would have beaten that fear that I felt that day, and, you know, put my heart and soul into it. And I rescued the business within a month because of it. Thank goodness I have a really good accountant. But how can somebody teach that if you've never actually gone through that entrepreneurial experience? So again, you know, if you're going to get advice and support from people, make sure it is from people who have gone through it or are going through it. Because again, somebody from outside sometimes, for a lot of young designers particularly, they often say, you know, oh, I've been asking, you know, my parents for, you know, support or advice. And then I said, well, has your parent ever actually run a company? And they go, you know, no. And I said, well, you also need other people that can give you support and advice that have run a company, that understand what you're going through. Because, you know, you're asking the wrong people for advice otherwise.
Yeah, definitely. You've got to go to the people who have had a similar experience to what you want to be going into. That, yeah. Another comment, I've never heard the term portfolio career, but love the idea. It makes so much sense, and good that it is not now as frowned upon, as I remember so many people saying similar things about CVs of jobs needing to make sense.
Yeah. Oh no, it was, I said, I remember many years ago just thinking, well, I wonder if I go and work for somebody else. I was between my businesses and thought maybe I'll go and try something else. So I went to a recruitment consultant and they looked at my CV and went, no. And I said, what do you mean no? They went, yeah, we can't get a job for you. You've got too many different things. And I was like, oh, they said, yeah, you know, you haven't got any skills that are employable skills. You are, you know, that's it. And I was like, oh, okay. So I went out and thought, I got lots of skills that I could take into other companies and do different things with. So I bought their recruitment agency.
Wait, sorry, what did you do?
I bought their recruitment agency. I bought it. I was like, I'm going to show people that it doesn't matter. People can have lots of different skills to do different things. And the woman that I remember had interviewed me, who stayed on and always laughed that, you know, one day I was unemployable and the next day I was her boss. Of saying, you know, she said, well, it was all these things like you're an actress and things like that. She said, you know, how did that? I said, that gave me the confidence to be able to stand at the O2 and talk in front of 13,500 people. You know, every skill you do, everything you've learned will come back at some point to do it. So, yeah. So that was one of my businesses. I owned a recruitment consultancy just because she annoyed me by telling me she couldn't give me a job.
That's amazing. Wow. Yeah, Davina says, Alison, you're so inspiring. I completely agree. That is wow, it's so inspiring. And it is just, that's fantastic, because you're then able to change the people who are in that company to then not let other people down like that, because that could have been really devastating. Well, I'm sure it was devastating to hear that, and then some people might end up like rethinking themselves, and you know, there could be so many bad things that can happen from that. So it's fantastic that you've like turned it around and shown that, you know, actually this experience can help me with this, because it's so true. Like any experience that you have is so important.
And again, I think education, learning how to identify your skills, how are they transferable? And I think that's something that's often not approached either, is you just look at jobs as job titles instead of looking at jobs of what are the things that you have done that will help you something else. So transferable skills and acknowledging what you've got and what you're good at, and also what you're bad at. And just because you're bad at something doesn't mean you can't be successful either. You know, I have loads and loads of weaknesses that would probably, if I did some sort of test, would say I shouldn't be an entrepreneur or I shouldn't run my own business. But you learn around your own weaknesses and then you find ways of dealing with it. So don't let anybody ever put you down. Find the people to support you.
That is fantastic. That's such a wonderful and lovely note to end on. Persephone has just said again that this is a fantastic story. So yeah, I think this is a great way to end. I'm aware that we ran over, so I'm really grateful for people who have stayed. Alison, thank you so much for taking part in this event. Everything you said has been so invaluable and inspiring, and I hope everyone's motivated and inspired too to really like push for what they want to be doing in life. I just think this is so fantastic. So thank you so much for your time, Alison.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, I'm so glad you've enjoyed it. I certainly have too, and I'm sure everyone in the audience has as well. So if anyone would like to contact Alison, her details are in the chat. I will also share them in the email after this talk. I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who has been turning up to all of the talks, and especially tonight. As I was saying, this is the final talk from the series, so it's just been fantastic to see everyone, you know, new faces and reoccurring faces too. It's just fantastic. It's great to know that people tuning in want to hear and talk about mental health in the fashion industry. It shows us that this topic is a global conversation that people want and need to talk about. We will be uploading all of the previous talks and also Alison's talk on YouTube for people to either rewatch or catch up on talks that they've missed. If you'd like to visit the virtual exhibition I've been talking about, the link is in the chat now. It's free and will be running for a few more days, so please do make sure to check it out if you haven't already. We're also always looking for more champions to join Time to Change. If anyone would like to get involved, the information is in the chat as well. And just again, if anything has upset you during this conversation and you need support, you can call the Samaritans on 116 123, or you can text shout 85258. We have added the signposting links again in the chat for UK, Sri Lanka, and Mexico. There's lots of help out there, so please do reach out if you need to. And just a big thank you again to everyone in the audience, and also Alison. It's just a great way to end the series, so thank you so much. I'm very happy with how everything's turned out.